Welcome back to another episode of Lost in the Farmer's Market Garden Shorts, where today we're looking at our subject here. Its scientific name is Solanum x burbankii, or it's commonly known as Wonderberry. Now, some of you who have been to the market have seen me selling these plants. So, today we get into what makes them special. Now, this specimen, grown at the test gardens, ironically not ironically, but in pure compost, with a layer of heat pots on the top to simulate mulch, is doing spectacularly. In fact, if you zoom in just a little bit, you can see little white flowers on it. So it's effectively mature already. Now, Wonderberry takes about 75 days to mature in the garden. Maturity means it is old enough to produce flowers, thus pollen, thus reproduce. Now, what's interesting about this plant is that it is in the Solanaceae family, which means it is a nightshade, and thus it is a relative of tomatoes, potatoes, peppers, eggplant, and a lot of things I plant at the test gardens that aren't your parents' variety of nightshade. That's the best way I can put that. I was going to throw an expletive out there, but let's skip. Anyway, so this plant, its parents are native to South Africa, and I'll get into why that is later. It is a hybrid. That's what the X means. It is a cross between two plants, and burbankii is the name of the person who did the cross. The guy who did the cross is named Luther Burbank. He bred it into a more desirable form with less of the negative traits, and we're going to get into what it's used for and all that jazz in a second. Now let me just focus. It's not frost hardy at all, and as far as I can tell, it's not perennial anywhere in the U.S., but maybe with some clever land management tactics and some rocks and some mulch, maybe in Zone 11? Don't know. But it's probably better off in the South American zones, I'm guessing. It prefers a soil pH of 6.1 to 6.5. Alright? Its exposure is full sun, but I find in my field tests over the last 10 years that it prefers protection from afternoon sun and full sun in the morning, which is fine. Its height can be up to 3 feet, and as you can see with this specimen, this one's already pushing is over the 2-foot mark. And its width can be 18 to 2 feet, which as 18 inches to 2 feet. So as you can see, this particular specimen is clearly doing that as well. It's freely branching, like an indeterminate tomato or a pepper. In fact, looking at the leaves, you can see that it almost looks a little bit like, it looks a little bit like husk tomato, which is also in the nightshade family, and it's one of those weird relatives that is a nightshade, but in some ways performs not like it. Okay. Now it has other nicknames. It has other common names. Garden huckleberry is one, and sunberry is the other one. Now the problem with these common names is that there are other plants that also have these common names, so it can be confused for them. So make sure you know that scientific name is attached to that seed packet, which I definitely verified. Now, here's the hard deets. As I said before, it is a safer hybrid bred by Luther Burbank in the 1900s as a cross between Solanum villosum and Solanum guineanensis. Jeez, that's a weird name. But it may also be crossed with Solanum retroflexum, which is usually the Wonderberry that pulls up when you type it in flat out. That one may or may not be safe to eat. However, we know that these varieties come from Africa, which is interesting. It is, it's a berry, essentially, so I would imagine, I don't know if it's a primary food, but there is a specific Zulu word name for it, so I'm presuming it was significant enough that folks probably ate it fairly regularly. Retroflexum, I mean. Now, it at times can be finicky to germinate in a greenhouse, but may volunteer freely in the garden. Now, after the first trial with this plant, I had little ones coming up near where it was for at least a year or two afterwards. I should have cultivated them, but didn't, because I was moving on to the next thing. In the greenhouse, I can attest to it being finicky. I didn't have a lot of these plants to sell. This is technically one of the plant pots that sold where the seeds were kind of stuck together, and all of them came up, and now I have a bush. So, it's hit or miss on the germination. You sow shallowly, keep moist, keep warm, and it may take longer than, by comparison, a tomato, and something like the amount of time it takes for a pepper to come up, especially the hot ones. So Be patient. 7 to 21 days is about right. Now, what'll sometimes happen, I should add this as an addendum, you will have given up on it, you will have recycled that potting soil into another pot somewhere, and then suddenly you have this weird thing coming up. I'm finding out my ground cherries are doing that all over the place, and for volunteers, I'm not mad. If this thing starts coming up in random pots next year, not mad. Now, here's one thing I need to warn you about. Do not, under any circumstances, eat the fruit when it is green. You want it in that rich, blackish purple color, because then it is ripe. When it's green, much like certain fruits off tomatoes and peppers and things, it might be less than enjoyable. Tomatoes, the nightshade families have defensive compounds to keep things from eating them at certain stages. Like, tomato foliage is pretty nasty to grazers. But those little bastard hornworms, they have no problem whatsoever, and they're just pooping it out all over the place. I'm not bitter. So, I will point out that this plant is often online mistaken for Solanum, melanocerasum, or retroflexum. Be very careful about what you buy on seeds and plants. Now, there is one other point of note. Although this plant technically originates in Africa, and the cross still makes it an African plant, technically. It could also be an African heritage plant, even. In the New World, yes, fabulous. This plant has a unique trait. There is a species of insect called assassin bugs. Now, they sound horrible. They sound like there's something you want to avoid, except they're not interested in you. They don't care about you. They don't care about your pets. What they care about is other insects, especially soft-bodied ones. Well, every time I've grown this plant intentionally in the yard, assassin bugs have colonized the plant, laid their eggs in there. The eggs don't, and the larvae don't do any damage to the plant. They just hang out in there, and they attack anything that comes near insect-wise. And then they disperse into the garden, an army of assassins, stabbing their way to glory. Okay, well, actually, that is kind of dope. But you get my point. It's really cool. And the little assassin bugs are usually bright orange or bright red, so which actually signifies it's a warning sign. It's saying to other predators, don't mess with me, I'm gonna jack your stuff up. Or it might mean I'm poisonous. I don't know. But the bright colors are usually a warning of some sort. And they have amazing vision. If you hover your finger around them, they'll rotate to stare at it because they think it might be a bug. You know. They're really cool. You should never spray this thing with insecticides. As far as I know, nothing actually goes after this plant, though one of the leaves there in the frame has a hole in it, and I'm assuming that's physical damage, not insect damage. I've heard flea beetles will attack the plant while it's young. Whatever. I haven't, knock on wood, I've never actually seen a flea beetle here, so I guess it's a problem elsewhere. Anyway, there is just one last thing to mention. How do you use the berries? Well, I'm told they taste like garden huckleberries. Some say they're bland, some say they're flavorful. I'm going to assume somewhere in the middle. Now, I've been using them to color up other things, blending them with blueberries. Rabbit-eyed blueberries are very pretty. They're a luscious purplish blue color when they're ripe, right? But their insides ain't. Their insides are this weird grayish-white snot. I know, I probably just ruined that for you, but just chew the darn things. Don't look at it. Don't cut them in half, for God's sakes. Well, when you're doing preserves, the heating process can discolor, so Wonderberry to the rescue. These things are intensely purple and have very little flesh inside those tiny little berries, which is great because they can recolor other stuff. They can be made into jams and preserves. You can make sauces out of them. You know, you blender them up and with some oil or something like that. You can use them in your to-go milkshakes, your smoothies. You can throw them in your salad for a little special garden delight. Anyway, I really need yellow playing in the background for that. But, you know, you can use them in a variety of ways, and you can be creative. These are plants that don't require as much maintenance as your traditional tomatoes and your traditional crops. So, it's a new world out there for this one, and you ought to look into it. That is all I have for you today. I hope you liked this episode. If you did, hit the like and subscribe button. Let me know that you're out there. If you have any comments or questions, anything you think I didn't cover, go on and ask me them funky questions. As always, folks, keep them growing. Thanks for watching.